So maybe, Giancarlo, maybe let's put the slides up and we'll go through those, some of the things that are happening at the temple right now. This has been fun on these monthly meetings to show you, give you slideshows.
I'm working on that, brother.
Okay.
A little technical glitch happening here.
Okay. You know, someone reminded me that, and this was not before my time. I was a monk here at Mother Center, but I wasn't involved in Richmond in those early years. And but someone reminded me that it was once you purchased Richmond, it was 10 years before the changes had been made there that made it into such a beautiful temple. And I think we have to remember that as we approach the opening on September 26th. No, there are many, many more things that we want to accomplish. I think we've gotten a lot done in the year and a half. We had a very good group of people who were there steadily working on things, but we're not finished. There's more to do. And, you know, we have to keep that in mind. So let's celebrate the progress rather than lament what we haven't finished yet. I was getting some questions about, is this going to be done? And then is that going to be done? And what do we want to do in here and there? And I thought maybe I'd go through a few of those points as we went through the pictures. So here is the scaffolding. And many of you saw this who were at the recent work party. The chapel wall scaffolding came down. This is the big wall that had the cross cut into the wood and the stained glass. You could see through it. And of course, it was decided that here at Mother Center, it was basically, yeah, that's not us. So let's see if we can, you know, somehow fill in the cross. And a very masterful job was done by David Strain to take wood that was in the back area of this altar around the two wings. They had wood, and he took some of that off the wall and fitted it in such a way that you cannot tell that there was something there. This wall is, I've mentioned to many of you, this is old growth redwood. And one of the monks, when he was up there, was remarking that he told me this. He knows wood. It's Brahmachari Klaus is working on altars. And, or was it Brahmachari Michael, maybe? Yeah, Michael was saying back in I think it was 1958 that this chapel was built. He said back then, old growth redwood was used on special projects like this. But since then, nowadays, you can't really, it's not even, can't even buy it. You can't even find it. It's a protected. But when we inherited the church, what you might not remember is this wall was very, very dark, which came from just 60 years of being exposed, probably candles burning, probably, you know, different things through the years that kind of just stained the wood. And you couldn't, from a distance, you couldn't really tell what it was. It was just a very, very dark wall. And so while the scaffolding was up, it was not only filling in the cross that was cut into the wood, but it was also refinishing the wood. So everything was sanded, finish was put on it. And what happened was it turned out to be a very, you know, very warm color. And I think everyone is very happy with the way it turned out. So it was now or never. You know, scaffolding goes up once probably in its existence. It's a big project to get scaffolding in there and to tackle the wall. So I'm very happy that we not only, you know, did the work on the cross that was there, but took the time to work on the scaffolding. There it is, all cleaned up. So now it was decided, we have an altar being designed at Lake Shrine. Brahmachari Michael and Brahmachari Klaus, both extremely good woodworkers, are designing the altar. They have it designed. They want to build a model. They want to build at least drawings that we can show everybody. But it's going to be a while. They're presently back in Boston, putting in the altar back there in the church that the Boston devotees bought. The altar was designed out here, and they're shipping it across country by truck. The two monks are going to meet the truck back there and assemble it in this church, this old church that they bought. But our altar is next on their list, so they get back and they jump into what we need here. So in the meantime, we had the altar from Berkeley, and we always thought this would be a good temporary altar. It's a beautiful altar designed by Jim Gunning for the Richmond Temple. We moved it from Richmond to Berkeley and now to here. And so this is David Strain putting up a support for the altar, which is a little wall that sits in front of that backdrop there. It's bolted down to the floor, and it has two metal supports that go back to the floor and are bolted down. So it's a pretty solid wall to hang this heavy altar on. Here they are moving it. It was over in the room next door. This is David Strain and Martin's helper, who's been instrumental and tireless in all of the projects he's been involved in. Martin Fink's contracting company. There they are. They're moving the pieces of the altar in. You'll recognize it once it's set up. This is the base. And you'll remember in Berkeley, I remarked on this. I said in Berkeley, this took up the whole front of the church. When you came in our Berkeley temple, this was across the front. You had two doors on the side, of course, but it pretty much occupied the front of the church. And when we put it up here, it just looks so miniaturized, but beautiful in many ways. Here it is hung. It's not quite finished, of course. We have to fill in the below it, and also in between the base of the altar and also the upper part. But it looks very stunning in many ways. And temporary altars you can often consider to be a table with some pictures on it. This is going to be quite stunning. We may have this for up to a year. I don't know yet. And these things take time to make and design and measure and all this sort of thing. So I think it's a very beautiful, and certainly will do us for a year or however long it needs to be. Someone was saying, can you go back to the last picture? Someone was saying it looks like the ship of self-realization, with 3 sails on it. And I had to say, yes, it does. I said HMS, Her Majesty's ship, self-realization. So it looks beautiful. And I think also against that backdrop, this natural color of the wood, it really stands out as being, the shape of it really stands out. In Berkeley, as you know, it was on a white wall, and maybe a little less obvious, the arches in it and things, but it certainly works. I mean, yes, it's undersized. You'd want it a little bigger if you were, but it's just a beautiful design. And our hat is off to Jim Gunning, because he really, as he always does, he captures, he was very good at what he did, which was seeing spaces and figuring out how that you could fill that space in the most beautiful way. Okay, so we did begin work on the Sunday school. We got the permits from the city of Walnut Creek. Everything has been cleared. So this work will go on steadily. This is downstairs in the auxiliary building next door, the fellowship hall. So this work will go on. Someone was asking me about time frame for Sunday school, and I have to remind everyone that Sunday school work is going on. We have not figured on a date to open Sunday school, nor will we until things become very clear to us. Presently, no Sunday school is happening within SRF, so no temples have Sunday school. I think it'll be 2022 before that bridge needs to be crossed, that decision needs to be made. Whether it's early in 2022 or spring of 2022, we'll have to see. But right now, there's a lot of concern for children and with COVID and all this sort of thing. And I think that all has to be resolved. And plus the decision to open Sunday schools will come from Mother Center. And so we'll wait on that. So nobody, please don't get worked up that you can't have Sunday school or what are they doing, starting with, we have to get this work done. And now's the time to do it. So we have a number of rooms that are going to be framed in. Carpeting is going to go in, painting, all of this sort of thing, new ceiling, lights. It's going to be a beautiful Sunday school. And I think everyone is going to be very happy with the kids, the teachers. And it'll be something that'll serve us for many, many years. So we're excited about that. Now, this is the wall that looks out toward the street. It was a kind of a dark green. We took the scaffolding down at the altar, and we put up scaffolding outside here so we can get up and paint this wall. So it's going from dark green to a white color. It'll match the front of the temple, that color there. And we'll brighten up the facade that looks out toward the street. So last work party, they were spraying the white paint, as you can see. This is a devotee, Lauren, who's a very good painter. And Jose, again, Martin's worker who's helping. And you can see the color change as he's going here. That'll be finished up by the time we open. Oh yeah, the parking lot has been resurfaced as of today. They came in and resurfaced the entire parking lot. They're going to stripe it. As you know, it had a lot of cracks in it, a lot of seams that were filled in with tar and things. This is going to make it much more even. It's going to fill in the cracks. It's going to make it right there. There's the before, as we all know. Here they are working on it. This was today, so we kind of closed down the place. Nobody was drove in. And I think they got it all down today. I don't know when the striping happens. I think tomorrow. Yeah. Our new parking lot. Beautiful. Okay, and there was a few other things I wanted to go over because some questions have been coming in, and I thought maybe I'd let everybody know here. Some people were asking what buildings we open and ready to receive attendees on the 26th, so a week from Sunday. The chapel is open fully. Restrooms and foyer area of the fellowship hall is open. The social room, however, is mostly full of various committees, boxes, equipment, and furniture. A small portion is being opened for overflow seating. So we will have a little part of that in their overflow seating if needed. Will the book room be open? Yes, it will be. Someone was asking, will the chapel have new carpeting by the time we open? And we hope to have new carpeting for opening day. However, delays from carpet stores have prevented installation happening by September 26th. It'll happen soon. The foyer carpeting is like a gray that's going to be replaced with a nice blue. And the strip of carpeting that goes up the center of the church up to the altar is red right now. It's going to be replaced with a blue carpeting. Now, somebody asked about blue carpeting throughout the entire temple. We're going to go with the floor as is for now. These kinds of decisions can be made later. And we're going to leave the pews in. The pews are yes, we have chairs from Berkeley, but you know, we have pews in certain temples. I mean, Glendale Temple has pews. I think the philosophy is to do what we need to do and use it, and then see how it works. So things like ripping the pews out, putting our chairs in, or carpeting the entire temple. We're going to wait on that, and we'll see. Well, you know, these kinds of things we have to decide on, but no decision has been made as of yet. Some people say, well, all the temples have blue carpeting. Yes, but most temples in India, I'm thinking, don't have carpeting at all. So there's no, this is not, you cannot find a passage in the Upanishads that says blue carpeting is necessary inside a temple. Otherwise, you can't go into samadhi. I'm joking, of course, that's my sardonic humor, but it's good to remember. You know, I told that story one time of the monks. We were meditating in our small chapel over here in the ashram at Mother Center. And this was years ago. And every morning there was a dog in the neighborhood that was just barking, 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 barking. And as we're meditating, it was very annoying. So somebody who was in charge of the ashram wrote to Mata and said, can we please go to the neighbor and tell them to put their dog inside during these hours? And, you know, it seemed like a reasonable request. Mata wrote back and she said, well, she said, I know what Master would tell you. Master would say, go deeper, go deeper. And you reminded of the mosquito consciousness quote by Sri Yukteswar. Is the whole world going to change for you? Get out of mosquito consciousness. You know, these kinds of things, that these little annoyances we may have about whether carpeting is the right color or the right pile density or whatever. We have to get over this. We have to get over this. I've meditated in the chapel there. It's going to be a wonderful place to meditate. Yes, we'll have to be conscious of the noise we make. Perhaps when we put our armrests on the ground, they might make some noise. We'll have to be careful about that. These kinds of things will overcome them. But I don't want us to be so sensitive when we walk in there, and if everything's not perfect, somehow we feel like we cannot meditate. That's not the case. And many times Master gives us these things just so we can overcome them and move on from them. Also, the garden area under the oaks on the side has not been renovated yet. We haven't decided what to do there. It's going to be, you're going to be able to walk on it, but it's not finished. So these kinds of things, we have to get into them as we move along. We're tackling the most important things. I remember vividly when we took over the place a year and a half ago, and I've been up there steadily visiting. I've been seeing the projects completed. The place looks completely different than when we took it over. Completely different. It was not well maintained when we took it over, and understandably so. They had a congregation that was very small, elderly. They didn't put any time into the gardens. We took it over, and steady progress on different areas, different projects, different things that had to be accomplished. The place looks, in my mind, we should be very proud of it because it's really quite nice. We're going to have another work party before we open on the 26th. On the 25th is Saturday. We're going to have one more work party. So if you would like to come out and help out, it'll start at 9 o'clock on Saturday. I'll be up there. I'm coming up that weekend with Brother Jayananda. And yeah, it's a kind of a last minute, let's buff it out so that when we open on 26th, it's clean and neat and ready to go. Also on the 26th, we're going to have, as we've told before, it's going to be an hour earlier than we had at Berkeley. So it'll be 9 o'clock, 45-minute meditation, 10 o'clock service, finished by 11. So we're doing that as an experiment. We can basically set the time whenever. I knew in Phoenix, we had a 10 o'clock service in the morning, partly because of the heat in Phoenix, but it gets hot out there too in Walnut Creek, especially in the summer months. So whether we want to continue with 10 o'clock, these kinds of things we'll figure out. But for the time being, we're going to start it with a 10 o'clock service, a 9 o'clock meditation. We'll have inside and outside seating on 26th. We'll space people out as best we can inside. If you're inside, masks required. Outside, masks recommended, but you can also, if you're sitting out by yourself and you're ways away, you don't need a mask. We're going to try to limit the number of people in the bathrooms to 6 in each bathroom. We don't know how parking is going to go. We have 78 parking spaces on the grounds. If we have a lot of single people coming in cars, then yeah, we're going to be short of parking spaces. But these things, again, we have to figure out. And I also believe that if we approach it with the right attitude, these things will be figured out. We'll be fine. So I think that's all. It's very exciting coming up to the day we open. This is not the formal opening. We're going to open on 26th. We'll use the temple and get used to it. I think a formal opening, we'll schedule that sometime in the spring of 2022. Formal opening, I mean by that a ribbon that you cut with a nice pair of scissors and special guests invited and this sort of thing. So that'll be in the spring. It'll give us an opportunity to use the church to get used to it, see how we handle crowds, all of these things that we're going to learn a lot in the next few months. So as helpful as you can be observant. And if you see things that might help, let me know. But also don't be critical in a way, because that doesn't help either. And I do think that, when we all assemble, the world has become a different place from what I read and from what I kind of slightly observe. I mean, I live in an ashram, so I'm not there all the time, and I don't know, I don't experience these things on a daily basis. But I think when we come to the ashram, we have to shift gears and be positive. Don't be negative. Don't discuss things that we don't need to discuss. The world can fight over the details. We don't need to. Master was very serious and very strict about people discussing things that were negative. He didn't like that around him. He was such a pure soul that I think it also, he realized that these things, they take away from environments. He didn't want people discussing illnesses in the ashram. If you were ill, you just stayed in your room and you didn't talk about it. People didn't know the details. One time, who told us this? Was it Mata? I think so. Yeah, one time an ambulance came for Daya Mata. This is back in Master's time. Was it Daya Mata? See, now all the details, it's like what happens when the brain cells get lazy. I think it was Daya Mata who was carried out to an ambulance. And someone came up to Mata and said, "Who is that? Who?" And she said, Daya Mata, who was Faye in those days. Master called Mata and said, "What did you say? What did you say to that person?" He said, "Well, sir," he came up and he asked, she asked, "Who was that?" And I said, "It was Faye." "That all you said?" "Yes, sir, that was all I said." Okay, so he let that go. But he was making the point. Now, Master knew these things. He knew what people said. He knew what their intentions were. But I think he would do these things to impress upon them the importance of not gossiping, the importance of not bringing negative thoughts in. And for him, discussing what possibly could be the problem. Why did an ambulance come? How is Daya Mata's health? These kinds of things, none of your business. He thought, this is not helping anything. So he was very exacting in demanding a positive, look to the good. And I think today's world is not that way. It's so divisive. You've got people on this side, you got people on this side, and they don't see eye to eye. And there's a lot of arguing and a lot of don't bring any of that. Don't bring any of that. We're there to feel Divine Mother's presence. I think if we come with the right attitude and look around for how can I be helpful, how can I bring my best self to it? It's going to add to the harmony and the peace and just the things that we're all seeking. So that's your minister getting on a soapbox and letting you know. So we all agree, huh? I think so. I don't think I have anything much more to say. I did find another letter. I thought maybe we could, this has been a raging success. Letters from India, which is kind of remarkable to me, but it does speak to the vibration that comes through the pages of former President Daya Mata in India. And this section that we just got to is they went to Nagpur, a city in India, where the Yogacharya lived. The Yogacharya, you remember even from autobiography, there's a picture of him in there. In 1958, he was sponsored by Self-Realization Fellowship to come to the United States. It was the first time that a Yogacharya, a Shankaracharya left India, and certainly the first time one came to America. Self-Realization Fellowship sponsored him. He stayed with SRF here. He went on a lecture tour. He was, different places. I heard a few stories. We heard a few stories in the early years from Brother Premomoy, who was asked by Daya Mata to be his host when he was here. And Brother Premomoy had a very high opinion of him, as did Daya Mata. And I think that through the years, I've kind of realized, or I heard this somewhere, or it makes sense to me, that the Yogacharya, he took a real liking to Daya Mata. He kind of thought of her as like a spiritual daughter. She was much younger than him, but on one of her trips to India, there was some question that came up. Some authorities in India were questioning this religious leader who was from America and was a woman on top of that. And the Yogacharya stepped in and he said, look, I know this person, and this is a saint, and she should be treated like one. Now, this is this Shankaracharya is like a pope. He has such tremendous sway in the culture of India. What he says becomes law, and he really opened doors for Daya Mata when she was there. But this wasn't just something he was saying. He had a real respect for not only Ma, but really SRF and the teachings that Master brought to the West. So, and there were very, very nice stories about I have to remember to read this letter before we go, but there were nice stories about him. The story Brother Premoy used to tell. We have a little guest house here at Mother Center. It's across the street from the front gate. And that's where the Yogacharya lived. The Shankaracharya lived, I'm sorry. They put him up over there. There were 2 bedrooms there in that house, still are. And Brother Premoy stayed in one, and the Shankaracharya stayed in another. And Brother said he remembered one evening, it must have been the wintertime here at Mother Center. It got very cold. And Brother Premoy was thinking to himself, this Shankaracharya, he must be freezing in there. And Brother Premoy was, he was the epitome of kindness and looking out for someone else. He was a very, this is just so him. He said in the middle of the night, he tiptoed into his room and put a blanket on the Shankaracharya, an extra blanket on the Shankaracharya. And he went back into his room and got under the covers. A little while later, he heard his door open, and the Shankaracharya was tiptoeing into his room and putting another blanket on Brother Premamoy. And this was the relationship that they had. Brother Premamoy was very impressed by the man. And the Shankaracharya very much liked Brother Premamoy. He wanted to give him sannyas when he was here. And Brother Premamoy said, thank you, but it comes from Daya Mata in our organization. So he took sannyas a little while later from Ma. And the other story he told was the funny one where the Shankaracharya had gone around to different places. He also spoke at different schools. He, in his earlier years, he meditated in some caves and really got a tremendous amount of wisdom by studying some of the ancient scriptures of India. And one section had to do with mathematics. And he used to say that during his years of meditation, he got behind or understood what the ancient rishis were writing about mathematics. And in his later years, he published a book, Vedic Mathematics, where he talked about what he learned. And he was a brilliant man. He was a jnani, really somebody who was very, very perceptive. And one of the schools he went to was Caltech here in Los Angeles. And Brother Premamoy went with him. He was to talk to the mathematics department. And Brother Premamoy said it was very interesting because the Shankaracharya, very, very slight man. He went in and he sat on the stage, cross-legged in the chair. And he said this big hall was filled up with these very brilliant scientists, mathematicians. And Brother Premamoy said he looked around the room and saw it was not a receptive audience. Most of them were leaning back. They were smoking cigarettes. They were talking among themselves. They were there, but they were not really impressed. And so the Shankaracharya said to somebody, he said, write a problem on the board here, something very complex. And he said, I'll give you the answer to it. Well, they got somebody up there who wrote this formula that was unbelievable all across the board. The Shankaracharya looked at it. He stood up, walked up to the board, and just wrote the answer, just the numbers of the answer, big thing, and then sat down. And then brother said that somebody wrote down the formula that they had asked him and ran out of the room to the computer, which in those days occupied the whole basement of this Caltech, and he punched the numbers in. And some minutes later, he came back upstairs and he said, he's right. And brother said it was so interesting because all the people who were leaning back and smoking their cigarettes, he said they put out their cigarettes and sat up straight. And from that moment on, he just had the audience and just talked about the natural laws and the things that were behind mathematics. And brother said he gave a brilliant talk. But this was the man that we're going to read in this letter now that Ma wrote. An introduction, huh? Here we go. This is November 22, 1958. And Ma starts, beloved ones. So there's a letter she wrote back to Mother Son. It is Friday, and we leave for Nagpur to see His Holiness Jagat Guru Sri Shankaracharya Bharata Krishna Tirtha, whose visit to America last year, sponsored by Self-Realization Fellowship, was such an inspiring experience to us all. His Holiness, head of the ancient Govardhan Mat in Puri, Orissa, also has his ashram in Nagpur, which is the headquarters for his Vishwa Paranama Sangha, his association. So we drive to Howrah Station in Calcutta to catch the Bombay mail train to Nagpur. The station is a sea of faces, crowded with hundreds of younger boys dressed in khaki uniforms, military trainees, here to board the train for camp. She lists the people who were in the party with her. There's about 7 of them. And a number of them come to see us off. We are concerned because we arrive at the station late, owing to traffic en route. However, happily, we hear that our train hasn't even arrived yet, which I'm reminded of the story that Brother Vishwananda once told of his trip in India. He was waiting for a train. It wasn't there, it was late. 8 hours later, the train comes into the station. Brother Vishwananda climbs on board. The conductor looks at his ticket and says, no. This is yesterday's train. Your train will be here in an hour. India, yesterday's train. Finally, the train pulls into the station and we board our section. Because we hadn't time to drink milk or eat anything before leaving the ashram, one of the monks has brought food with him for us on the train. He's also filled a basket with fruits for us, while someone else has brought us some lemon and barley water and sweetmeats. The whistle blows and we slowly leave the station. Suddenly, Sister Revati, she was traveling with him at this time. It was Daya Mata, Ananda Mata, I think Sister Revati, I think those three were there on this trip. Notice this, we have retained the enamel pot in which our milk was carried. We hold it out the door and pass it to Debbie, who is running alongside our train door. Only in India does one constantly see such scenes as this, so informal, so uninhibited. We wave and are waved to until we can no more see or be seen by the loved ones. We settle down in our seats, and as time rolls by, we realize our bodies are quite weary. We roll out our sleeping bags. I place mine on the upper berth, which resembles a luggage rack. Our day is done, and our communion with Divine Mother begins. Oh, blissful hours. Oh, tender, loving mother, so sweetly caring for her wandering children pilgrims. In all truthfulness, we do not sleep much, being unused to the train motion and the smoke from the train engine. But our bodies rest and we do not mind. Dawn approaches and we open the window shutters to look out over the vast India desert land. How red the soil. The sky is cloudy today. The weather is cool but not cold. It is not difficult, however, to visualize this countryside in midsummer, deeply scorched by the sun's rays. The train stops at a small village station. Mataji, meaning Ananda Mata, opens the door to take pictures of a small girl carrying on her hip a tiny naked brother. We give her a coin and her eyes so large brighten with thanks. Slowly, a group of inquisitive natives gather about our section. They see we are dressed in Gerawa cloth. Gerawa is the Indian term for ochre, so the ochre cloth, and ask us to what mission we belong. We tell them our guru is Paramahansa Yogananda. They are interested and the group becomes larger still. If only we had some YSS literature to distribute. A small lad walks along the train platform, pulling behind him a string, a lifelike snake. At first, we think it is alive, but as he draws closer, we see it is made of paper. We hail him with our limited Bangla and purchase 3 snakes to take back to America. At every station, there are clean stands where oranges and bananas are sold, as well as bottled milk. At Balaspur Junction, we see a fountain newly painted bearing this sign, drinking water only, bathing or washing prohibited. Even as we read the sign, several Indians gather about the water spigots and wash their faces and teeth. The women of the small villages through which we pass wear very gaudy saris, flaming orange, fire engine red, shocking pink, Kelly green, and bright purples and yellows. The men's turbans are of the same loud hues, but here in this arid country, they're quite attractive. The villages appear to be very clean and the people contented with their simple life. By the side of each village is a large pond where the little brown bodies of children can be seen splashing about, while mothers and sisters nearby wash the family clothes and spread them to dry on the clean, bare earth. Each little group of huts or houses is surrounded by a mud wall about 5 or 6 feet high. Now and then we see herds of cattle grazing on this bare vegetation, while small shepherd boys wearing brilliant colored turbans and drab loincloths guide stray calves back to the herd using their shepherd staves. Down a winding road come 2 bullock carts carrying huge loads of hay, no doubt to market, while a short distance away a herd of water buffalo. These animals are used all over India as beasts of burden. Their milk is made into ghee for cooking purposes. We remember how Master would have sparingly used the buffalo ghee sent to him in America for his curries. Its flavor is quite strong, but imparts a delicious taste to Indian foods. It is late afternoon and the train is standing still. Mataji is in her bunk, resting and studying her master's words, and Daya is sunk in her own world of thought. Suddenly, we all come to attention as we hear a familiar voice calling, "Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo." We see dear Sister Revati at the window. "What on earth are you doing?" we ask. "Well, there are two small boys over there in the field, and I'm calling them to come get these cakes I'm holding, but they won't come." We burst into gales of laughter. We cannot help her, for we do not know the Bengali translation for yoo-hoo. That's reminded of another story. Someone recently told me that they were in Phoenix when Daya Mata came over there with one of the other nuns. And this was probably back in the 60s, late 60s or early 70s. And he said that he was in the temple. It was before the function began, and Daya Mata, and it was, I won't remember the name. It was one of the Vijoya Ma, I think, were in the back room. And he could hear through as he was getting things ready, he could hear through the partition them talking. And he said they were laughing like little children. And I think there was that sounds so right to me. There was such it was one of the qualities of Daya Mata. She was so, not childish, as she used to say of Master, but childlike, so pure, so innocent. The littlest thing would be just such a joy and a delight to her. And this reminds me of that I couldn't think of a translation for yoo-hoo in Bengali, so they were laughing. So to continue, we pass through a fascinating jungle country. Suddenly we come upon pools of water separated by mud embankments on which sit groups of monkeys. What a thrill to see them in their natural surroundings. Again, it is dark and our train slowly pulls into Nagpur station. We have been on the train 24 hours exactly, covering a distance of 700 miles. We are grimed with dust and soot from the train engine, operated by coal, not by diesel as in America. We've managed to remove some of the dust and prepare to meet Mrs. Trivedi. Our train door opens as the train comes to a stop, and a gentleman asks if we are Sister Daya and party. Even as we say yes, we catch a glimpse of Mrs. Trivedi running toward us, her face lit with a broad smile. We rush to her and embrace warmly. As she places about our necks beautiful garlands of yellow, orange, and white blossoms, interspersed with green leaves and silver tinsel, ending in 3 separate streamers. Photos of Sri Krishna shown wearing just such garlands. 2 are placed about the neck of each of us. We are taken through the station to a large car and slowly driven through the peaceful, quiet city of Nagpur to the ashram of His Holiness. We alight and enter the ashram after removing our sandals. We meet again Mr. Trivedi, who has not been well, and then ushered into the room where His Holiness waits us. His eyes are alight with happiness as we greet him, Indian fashion. While he blesses us, it says in his quiet way, Narayan. We exchange a few words about our travels and health, while a few devotees gather in the room and quietly sit on the floor after touching their guru's feet. Manjula brings in 4 large glasses filled with milk, warmed and sweetened, and serves the 4 pilgrims from America. She shows us a newspaper in which notice of our expected arrival appears. We learn that on the morrow, we will have dinner at 1 p.m. at the home of Mr. Rawal, disciple and benefactor of His Holiness. He has given this Nagpur ashram to His Holiness and also makes financial provisions for the care of the ashram and for His Holiness's needs. After a short discussion of our plans and after conveying greetings from the members and directors of SRF and YSS to His Holiness, we drive to the Mount Hotel nearby. Manjula places in my hands baskets containing huge tangerines, raisins, bananas, cashews, and salted wafers. And so another memorable day has come to an end. We 4 happy but weary pilgrims close our eyes on another day in India. So this is you have a few more minutes. Yeah, this won't take too long. So next day, they go back to see His Holiness. or are taken around. She describes what they're doing the next day. At 12 noon, Mr. Rowall arrives to take us to his home for dinner. With him are Manjula and Mr. Betharia, judge of the High Court in Nagpur. As we drive to the streets of Nagpur, we see large, well-cared-for bungalows that indicate the prosperity of their owners. We are told that the difference between a house and a bungalow is that a bungalow is surrounded by a garden. As we approach a large garden, one in our company points to a small building and says, "Then that is a bungalow." "No," replies the host, "that is an outhouse. The bungalow is over there," pointing to a larger building. Mr. Rowall has a large, attractive bungalow. We were introduced to his family members and then go into the dining hall, where we take our places on the clean floor. Small wooden platforms stand before us on which banana leaves have been placed. We eat from stainless steel dishes with our fingers, such delicious Indian foods. No use explaining about them. They're beyond description. The flavors are pleasingly new to us, and we wipe our plates clean. After dinner, we see the spotlessly clean kitchen with its shining copper pots. Sister Mataji takes photos of the women of the house cooking. Our hosts are so gracious and hospitable. I admire a book of photos of Gandhi, and instantly the book is given to me to take back to America. Our host, Mr. Rowall, is a quiet, thoughtful man, deeply devoted to His Holiness, whom one and all call Guruji. We are in his debt for a most pleasant afternoon in a Nagpur home. Later in the afternoon, we are driven again by Mr. Rowall to the ashram of His Holiness, where we are to visit with him before the people gather at 5 p.m. to meet us. As gifts to His Holiness, we have brought some Garawa cloth, again some ochre cloth, several albums of publicity and photographs taken during his American tour, and films showing his arrival in Los Angeles on February 4th, 1958. He is pleased. He fingers through each album, vividly recalling incidents pertinent to the pictures and write-ups. We marvel at his remarkable memory for detail. The Jagat Guru smiles often as he talks with us about his visit to Los Angeles. We are very happy to see him again and to bask in the sunlight of his wisdom. The evening crowd is assembling, and it is time for the regular Sunday meeting held by His Holiness to begin. Because we are here, the occasion is made an informal gathering to meet us also. We enter the hall where we're to wait until the Jagat Guru is seated on the open veranda, from which he will speak to the devotees who sit on the patio. After he is seated, we are called to enter. And as we do, his disciples again place beautiful garlands about our necks. His Holiness beckons us to sit by his side. And then Mr. Trivedi delivers a speech of welcome to the American visitors. Then I am asked to speak. I tell about His Holiness's visit to the United States and of the tremendous receptivity of the Americans to the Jagat Guru's message of world unity and world peace. He was heard by thousands, nay, millions, the ecologists all over the states, radio and television. I say too that the memory of his visit with us at the Mount Washington Center, of the treasured talks we had with him, and of his wisdom and gentleness and humility will ever remain in our hearts. Sri Shankaracharya then speaks. He tells the audience that the great success he enjoyed in America was all due to the efforts of Self-Realization Fellowship. On one occasion, he says, someone put a question to me, probably from a spirit of mischief. I was asked whether the students of Self-Realization Fellowship were receiving their teachings from me. This is the Shankaracharya speaking. I replied, they were practicing the teachings of India's sages long before I came to them or had any correspondence with them. Indeed, it was for this reason that I wrote to Self-Realization Fellowship in 1957 and said that I hoped I could be their guest in America. Though they are not my students, I find nothing in their teachings or practices of which I disapprove. On the contrary, I am pleased to be able to give them my fullest support. I want to add, still quoting the Shankaracharya, I want to add that I found in Self-Realization Fellowship the highest spirituality, service, and love. Not only do their representatives preach these principles, but they live according to them. His Holiness then speaks of his deep affection for us and of his joy in seeing us again. He finishes by mentioning sweetly his sadness in the fact that, united as we are in bonds of mutual love, we must part again so soon. Tears fill our eyes as we feel the love and affection pouring from the heart of this great soul. And our own hearts respond as he paid tribute to those who serve in the fellowship. After his talk, we sit silently by his side as devotees come forward to offer him and then us prasad and to greet us. Later, His Holiness Jagat Guruji sits out on the porch with a few devotees gathered about him and calls me to his side. As we sit there, he quietly turns to me and says, "Do you remember the last talk that I gave at Mount Washington Ashram in America?" My heart floods with remembrance, for that on that occasion, I had asked him to give us some discourses on bhakti yoga, so dear to my heart, and the things he had said at that time were still fresh in my mind. I nod and mention the subject of his last talk with us, and he smiles ever so sweetly. Go to the end of this. The next day, our last in Nagpur, we go to the ashram for dinner, which was cooked by Mrs. Trivedi and a young devotee. Mr. Rawal, patron and faithful disciple of His Holiness, is with us. We are much impressed by this devotee, whose humility and devotion to his guru are clearly evident. His Holiness's chest cold is no better, and we feel some concern for him as he greets us from the little wooden bed. Lest our presence call him to make an effort to talk with us, we sit in silence and meditate. Soon we are called to dinner, and we retire to the dining hall, where we are served with delicious, unusual dishes made with rice, vegetable salad, soup, and dal puri, and numerous other dishes unknown to us. While we are eating, His Holiness silently slips into a chair and lovingly watches us as we eat, making certain that we have enough and we are enjoying the dishes prepared. How this gesture touches our hearts. As we come more in contact with him, we are reminded often of Sister Daya Mata of SRF, whose wisdom-soaked personality was so much like that of His Holiness Jagat Guruji Shankaracharya, and whose gentle ways were so similar. We cannot forget the affection with which we were received at the ashram, the wisdom and understanding of His Holiness, his many kindnesses to us, the friendship of the Trivedis, who did everything to make our trip such a happy occasion. Nor can we forget the gracious hospitality of Mr. Rawal and his family, who showered so much love upon us, whose nephews drove us everywhere in the family car, and whose niece and our daughters prepared such delicious foods for us. Nor do we forget how they sat with us until the early hours of the morning in the airport, while we waited our plane to take us on to Bombay. We remember too the generosity and friendliness of Mr. Gata and his family, who served as our host during our stay in Nagpur at the Mont Hotel. We hope we will have an opportunity sometime to extend to these wonderful devotees of His Holiness our hospitality in America. While in Nagpur, we were invited to visit the Women's College and found this institution quite modern and progressive, the teachers and principal well suited to their tasks, and so warm and friendly to us visitors from an American ashram. We also visited the Ramakrishna Mission in Nagpur as the guests of these teachers who drove us to the mission in the school bus in the rain. We are enjoying making new friends for YSS SRF as we travel from place to place. Our visit in Nagpur was a memorable one. The highlight, of course, being those treasured visits with His Holiness Sri Jagat Guru Shankaracharya, a wise, loving, and saintly soul. We took our leave of him with considerable sadness in our hearts. For where there is affection, there is also an element of sadness at parting from those for whom we feel and from whom we receive warm, sincere affection. Our dear Daya Mata, and a wonderful episode in our trip to India. I'll just sit for a moment in silence and we will conclude. Let us pray. Divine Mother, beloved Guru, fill our hearts with the love and thanksgiving of the newly awakened saint. We bow in gratitude for the many blessings that we have been given and seek that attunement where we feel thy presence in all that we do. Om. Peace. Amen. Jai Guru. We'll see all of you, many of you, in the days ahead. Those of you we don't see, Master's blessings ever with you. And it's been all of these visits with all of you. They're fun for me too. I think I find these visits with Daya Mata, they put us in her presence and leave us with an inspiration. So we'll see you soon. God and Guru bless you. Hold them close. Jai Guru.